Hello, my name is Msgr Barr from the Diocese of Rockford, Illinois. You are taking part in a diocesan-wide program designed to protect our children and give them a strong foundation for understanding sexuality and practicing the virtue of chastity. And that may sound boring, but it is not. Most Catholics, you see, steer clear of speaking about sex or chastity, and the reason is simple. They think the Church hates human sexuality and bans the practice of it except for the necessity of having kids. In fact, most Catholics feel that the Church needs to change its negative views. Well, in fact, most of us are just plain misinformed. I remember teaching high school seniors about marriage and sexuality. I had given them an essay to do on why premarital sex was wrong. And one paper came back with the best topic sentence I had ever read. The students started the essay saying, "Premarital sex is a very touchy subject." And after I got done laughing, I wrote the only thing I could. I said, "It certainly is." So face it, we all feel uncomfortable about the topic. But what I hope you will get out of this video is a new perception of what the Church actually teaches, namely, a very positive and joyful view of sexuality. And along with that, the meaning of the virtue of chastity. It's not just about saying no. It's about living life to the fullest. In our society, there are really only three ways to look at sexuality. First is the hedonistic way, popularized by the Playboy culture. In this way of thinking, sex is meant for enjoyment and our happiness. If it feels good, do it, is the mantra of this style of life. The second is the secular way, popularized by our educational institutions and the general public opinion. In this way of thinking, sex is a natural human act. We should never harm anyone with it, but anything goes, provided two human beings of age agree to participate. It can't be wrong if it feels so right, is the mantra of this style of life. But the third way is the Catholic view, held by the Church for 2,000 years. In this way of thinking, sex is a holy and good thing created by God for the union of a man and woman and the procreation of children. It is sacramental in nature and is not to be confused with the type of sexuality practiced by animals, which is basically biological in nature. So, whether you are a hedonist or a secularist, your main purpose in life is to be happy. There are few boundaries governing sexuality. It's as natural as eating or sleeping. As a Catholic, however, boundaries do exist. We are placed on this earth to know, love, and serve God, and be happy with Him in the next. Happiness, personal fulfillment, etc., are not the main goals of humanity. Instead, serving God and loving one another are. Sexuality fits into this plan by uniting man and woman and producing the foundation of society, namely the family. From all of this comes true happiness on this earth. A person in our society is faced with either no real rules governing sexuality or a way of thinking that integrates sexuality into the whole context of living. Very easy to do the first, very difficult to do the second. No wonder most folks take the easy way. But is it the right way? We have to ask ourselves how our society has benefited from practicing either the hedonistic or secular way of sexuality. Look, divorce is rampant. So apparently the anything goes attitude hasn't strengthened marriage. Abortions are commonplace. So apparently an appreciation of life has not increased. Our contraceptive mentality has broken the connection, severed it between sex and procreation. Instead of freeing us, we have fewer kids, and those we do have live in splintered families with no boundaries and even less happiness. So apparently sexual freedom has not improved children's lives. Now, a lot of criticism is heaped on the Church for its views and values. But one really has to ask, are the other ways offering a better society or a happier humanity? It seems not. And don't take my opinion, just look at the facts. Did you know that the Catholic view of sexuality is a very positive one? It's true. We believe that sex is good. It has to be, since it was created before the fall of humanity occurred. Just check it out in Genesis chapter 1. When God created the heavens and the earth, He created them good. When God created the animals, He created them good. When God created man, he created him good. Male and female, he created them. Adam and Eve complemented one another. Together, they made humanity perfect. And what that means is that when Adam and Eve had sex, God saw that it was good. And from the love between them came a closer relationship to God and a closer relationship to one another and a family. And it was absolutely beautiful. Only when man turned from God did sexuality become part of the rest of fallen human nature. Now, just like a person could use his freedom to murder, like Cain did to Abel, so a person could now use his or her sexuality to hurt another, or use it in ways not intended by God. But when Christ came and redeemed us, giving us baptism as a new birth, he washed away our sin and saved us. Unfortunately, the effects of that sin were not washed away. They remained. So here's the word for the day: concupiscence. Concupiscence. That's the tendency we have in our bodies and souls to twist God's gift, including sexuality, into dark paths and wrong ways. The Church's teaching on sexuality is not complicated. In fact, it's very easy to understand and remember. There are 4 basic truths. First, God created man in his image and likeness. Nothing else in creation is like us or blessed like us. God dwells in us. Second, God created man as a physical being. Yes, man has a soul, but the body is equally as important. Our bodies are good. And third, God blessed us with a physical reality as male and female, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over it." All that you've heard before. But here is the 4th truth taken from the 2nd chapter of Genesis. Man is created in original solitude. He is alone. And in that solitude, he realizes his relationship to God and the fact that he is different from everything else in the world. But God does not think it is good for the man to be alone, so he creates a partner. Adam is no longer man. Instead, man is now seen as male and female. From solitude to communion. Now the union of male and female becomes a shadow of the Trinity, a communion of persons. Okay, that sounds heavy, but this really isn't. Let's do it in a shorter form. Remember these 4 things. God made us in his image. We aren't just souls, we are bodies. The flesh is good. God blesses maleness and femaleness and says that we are to populate the earth. And lastly, we were not meant to be alone. Marriage unites man as one, male and female, one body in a life-giving love. Now, if you can remember this, then you've got the basics for our teaching on sexuality. It's not everything, but it is the basis. Now, just add 2 more ideas, and you'll be ready to take a look at sexuality in our time from a Catholic view. We've already talked about concupiscence, that tendency we have to twist God's gifts, including sexuality, into dark and sinful ways. But there's a virtue that helps us in this area called chastity. Chastity is the virtue whereby we regulate our use of sexual activity in accord with our state of life. It does not mean no use of our sexuality. Rather, it means the appropriate use of our sexual powers given the state of our life. Chastity sounds so prudish and medieval in our modern age. I mean, can you think of a football player glorifying chastity? Don't be a pansy, choose chastity. Or a modern woman saying, real women aren't chaste, they're chaste. Or a young college girl saying, it don't mean a thing if you ain't got that ring. You know, most folks seem to breathe a pseudo prayer that St. Augustine used to say before his conversion. Oh, give me chastity, Lord, but not yet. Or rather the modern secular version of that. I'd rather be obstinate than abstinent. Face it, chastity is a virtue that has gotten a bad rap. But in reality, it is a robust, freeing, courageous type of virtue that helps a person be at peace with the urgent longings that human beings feel. Chastity helps us all realize that we are more than just sexual objects. And like all other things in our lives, sexuality must be integrated into who and what we are and the type of lives that we lead. Now, knowing the truths that we've just talked about makes understanding our church's teaching on sexual issues much easier. For instance, of course families form the bedrock of our society. They come from that self-giving love that a male and female in marriage share. Of course divorce is not going to be seen as permissible, because it breaks up that community of love that is a family. And of course, we aren't going to accept same-sex marriage because marriage by its definition needs a male and a female. Whatever union same-sex partners have, it is not a marriage. We cannot make words mean something they do not. Of course abortion is going to be wrong. We are made in the image and likeness of God. And destroying innocent human life is a terrible thing. And of course, embryonic stem cell research, which relies on killing an embryo, is wrong because it destroys a human being. Same thing with in vitro fertilization, which destroys life and separates the begetting of children from the love between husband and wife. And even contraception, which a vast majority of Catholics think is okay, is not going to be okay if you believe, as the Church does, that marriage has both a unitive, that means love side, and a procreative, that means kids side. All this certainty on my part makes decision-making in the realm of sexuality sound so easy, but of course, it is not. Because I've left out John and Jane and Mark and Mary and all the other individuals affected. When the human equation is put in, and when it involves persons close to us, or even ourselves, what seems so black and white can get mighty gray. A pregnant 16-year-old, two young people in love, a couple struggling to have a child, an individual not sure what to do about a homosexual orientation. All these things make applying God's teaching to ordinary life difficult. We want to have people happy. We don't like folks agonizing over sexual issues in their lives. And since our bodies don't have consciences, only our souls do, the very pleasure associated with sex clouds our minds on issues of right and wrong. And that's why we have to give weight to church teaching. Our Catholic morality is based on human experience, reflected on in light of the Scriptures for nearly 2,000 years. Before we just throw away moral teachings that seem to make our life hard, we ought to remember this. Freedom in our day and age seems to be about doing what I want when I want with my body and myself. But St. Paul tells us that this kind of freedom is an illusion. In fact, it's a slavery. True freedom means doing God's will. And that means we can't give in to every biological drive or whim we wish. We're not just animals, we are rational animals with souls. And God has a destiny for each one of us. Sexuality plays a big part in that destiny. And when lived according to God's law, really can help lead us not only to happiness, but to God Himself. Sexuality and our moral stance brings us very controversial issues in our day and age. And we will have more to say about those issues in the question and answer video. It's okay to have questions, and it's okay to struggle as we try to understand church teaching. But as the teachers of our young, we must understand why the church teaches as it does. And we must assent to it. We must say yes to it. Far from being puritanical and hating sex, the church in its teaching wants to preserve sexuality's holiness and its ability to bring true joy to humanity. Like my student said in his essay, sex is a really touchy subject, but it is not meant to be feared or misused. Far from being just an ordinary biological urge shared with other life forms on earth, human sexuality is a gift from God, our Father, meant to bring us closer to one another and to God Himself. St. Irenaeus said, "The glory of God is man fully alive." Sexuality is a big part of who and what we are. Thinking it is bad is a terrible sin. Thinking it's just a tool for enjoyment is a massive misunderstanding and abuse of who we are. Believing it is holy and good and a doorway to loving God and others more deeply is the Catholic Christian way of looking at this great gift of the Trinity to us. As you study this issue and teach our kids, be proud of our Catholic faith, which seeks to give us a clear path towards salvation. May God bless our efforts. May Christ guide each of you.